So, Dan, welcome to the line. I appreciate that you've stepped up to the line with us. I love that you brought your own coffee and that you're sharing with me. So that's awesome.
And if everyone notices that Josh is a little sleepier than usual, it's because he's been all decafed, which is my family and my team's requirement of me. So I've imparted it to the line. I've brought decaf to the line.
You have brought decaf.
I think it's the only time it's going to be here.
Yes, it is.
So there we go.
So, Dan, we're here in Columbia, Pennsylvania. I was driving in this morning, and it's like you guys are like tucked within the town. Mm-hmm. How long as we're at Sahd Metal Recycling? Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, awesome.
It's very good.
So, how long has Sahd been here?
My great-grandfather came over in the late 1880s from Lebanon.
Okay.
In the Middle East, which is in the headlines again.
Yeah.
It's always in the headlines. They came for opportunity.
Okay.
And they came here. My grandfather came here in the 1900s. It's amazing. I don't know your family's origin story, but these kids came over one by one, were shuttled over.
Wow.
From France, which was a protectorate of Lebanon, shuttled over. And eventually they settled downtown in Columbia on 2nd and Locust.
Wow.
219 Locust Street. And basically, 3 families live in a row house, much like immigrant stories of today.
Wow.
And what they did and what so many did at that time was survived. So they weren't looking at career development.
Yeah.
They were looking at survival.
Yeah.
So they were peddlers. They went out, they would deliver a load of fruit, and then on the way back, just pick up things, buy and sell, trade, antiques, whatever. There was no interest in the scrap industry at that time. There was interest in survival.
Yeah.
And that's how our industry really developed, in a sense.
The scrap industry?
Absolutely. It's Jewish, Italian, and a smattering of Lebanese. Which is a heck of a mix. But it's basically those families just came over and got the jobs they could get and survived because they didn't know the language and they just did their best. So that peddling led to antique trading and bringing items back, reselling it. And right around World War II, when there was a big interest in scrap for munitions.
Absolutely.
Huge scrap drives. That's when they gravitated into that. And later, in the 70s, we came to this location in 1951.
Okay.
It was a former quarry. It's like a park with metal in it.
I've been around it. It is.
It's really a tribute to sustainability in its truest sense. So we came to this location in 1951 and gradually just worked ourselves into still serving the general public, but really shifting into an industrial. So we serve industrial customers. That's what we do. We put our containers at their locations, buy the metal on contracts, and process the metal and resend it to a mill to be reused. So that's kind of in a quick synopsis. That's what we do, and we're in our 3rd generation. My cousin Mike and I are leading it now with a great team, and we're hoping to get to 4, 5, and 6.
So who is, I've been walking around here this morning, and who is Frank?
Frank is my grandfather.
Okay.
So he's the one who started it.
Okay.
And then my dad, Uncle Wayne, Uncle Frank, and my cousin, who everyone who's older was uncle. I don't know if that was in your family. I was like, how many weird trees do we have here? I had no idea if someone was really an uncle or just old. Uncle equals old.
Yeah.
So Uncle Mike, who was
So does that mean we should call you Uncle Dan?
Yes, you
Uncle
should.
Dan.
At 53, you should. So my cousin Mike and my dad and 2 uncles were the 2nd generation, and then now my cousin Mike's son Mike and I are the 3rd generation.
Wow, 3rd generation. You know, it's interesting sitting around here, and in my history, I've been around scrap yards a lot.
Really?
Well, so I became an electrician when I was a young man, and scrap is a big part of what we do.
Sure. You try to create as little as possible off a roll. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Well, and I just remember one of my first jobs at the electrical contractor that I worked for. They had a huge job where they had all these spools of like 500 MCM copper, and they bought a stripper so that we could take the insulation off because it was well worth it.
Yes.
And for an entire summer, I just stripped copper wire.
Is your stripper better than mine?
Well, I never thought I'd hear that on the podcast. Is your stripper better than mine?
But seriously, we have a stripper from 1950.
Yours is probably better.
Our stripper's better.
Yeah.
Aged to perfection. I'll tell you, that thing it slices it right off.
Yeah.
I mean, and think about the innovation of people in the electrical business. There are people who they basically nail them up to a wall, use the utility knife, and do it that way. And that's kind of one of the things I really love about this industry. The customers we attract and the work ethic even shines through in the scrap they produce. Because in your profession, electricians of all kinds, they don't have the equipment I have to strip this stuff. They're doing it, and a lot of guys will just do it. They'll, get it heated up in the sun, and then just nail it to a wall, get a utility knife, and I just love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You use the tools that are available to you.
Well, I mean, that actually comes out in your story, the innovation and the history of figuring it out and getting it done.
Correct.
That's what your family did. That's in you. And I think that's one of the biggest things in business and in life is, getting things done and figuring them out. We, at our parent company, we have books that we give out to new hires, like 4 books that they're supposed to read. And one of my favorites that we give them, it's really thin and it's really old, probably over 100 years old, written by a guy by the name of Peter Kine.
Okay.
And it's called The Go-Getter.
Okay.
And it's a fable, but it's all about this guy, and he wants a job, and the way that they interview him is they're like, well, I want this blue vase, and they send him on this, trip to get it. And everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and there's like no way for him to get it, but he goes and gets it and doesn't give up. He figures out how to do it, and that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And we talked a little earlier about your business transition and the one we're in, about delineating procedures, writing processes. And you can have all that, and you need to have all that in a business if you want to grow and bring it to the next level. But at some point, you do have to improvise. Yeah. And you have to just get things done and just make them work.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Talk about, I think the scrap industry gets is that what you would call it, the scrap industry?
No, we've had a big thing in the recycled materials
industry.
There we
go.
Yeah, we actually had our association had a huge rebrand this year, and it's the Recycled Materials Association.
Well, and I think that's what I wanted to get to, because I think that the industry gets a bad rap because, we're talking about electric cars, we're talking about our environment, all of these things. And I've learned this over the years of being in the trades and being involved in the recycled materials industry, is that what we're calling it now?
Yeah.
I have, you come here to a scrapyard, and it's like, my goodness, we're sitting next to this giant claw, which is super awesome.
It's not a giant, it's a mic holder. It's a mic stand.
There we go. See, I was thinking this was kind of like Toy Story. You even have the right colors. You're like,
yes.
The claw. I mean, hopefully it doesn't pick us up. I don't know if that would go real well.
Are you magnetic?
No.
Well, your personality is.
Oh, there it is. Wow, we're going out with the dad jokes already.
We are. Sorry.
My goodness. I have a reputation here. You can add other things to coffee that would like level that out. I don't know if you can do it this early in the morning, but
no, probably not.
Yeah. But talk about this industry, and I don't think people realize this, but this is like the first line, I think, in a green planet, in protecting our environment. We always talk about sustainable, and it's like this industry is the first step in that. Talk about that a little bit to educate people that might listen, about what that is.
So buzzwords are great, but buzzwords need to get dirty for things to happen.
I love it.
I mean, buzzwords are wonderful, but this is sustainability. What I think the way to think about this is we are the end and the beginning of the supply chain. End of story.
Come on.
End of story. COVID, all we heard about was supply chain. We are the beginning, the end, and the beginning of the supply chain.
Come on.
Everything comes here when it's obsolete, and everything gets processed, chopped, torched, baled, and sent somewhere to start anew. Without us, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So if you think about that and the essential nature of this business, there's bar none, there's nothing else more essential outside of defense and some bigger things, this industry, because you can't create new without us.
Yeah.
You mentioned sitting in a copper mine and interviewing some people in copper. And I'm sure I can't wait to see that podcast because we don't even realize how short we are of materials.
Oh, my goodness.
You could dig everything in the ground. You could recycle everything on top of the ground. And we're still going to be short. And we're still going to have wars.
Yeah.
All we're doing is shifting a war for oil to a war for natural resources. And if people don't understand what's going on at the highest levels, they're really, really missing the real story.
Wow.
For us, our little part in that is creating 100% closed loop sustainability on the materials that are already out there and bringing it back.
Yeah.
Without that, we're already short on our grid. I mean, my daughter,
oh my goodness,
this summer was on a train to Connecticut, all right? And 2 times the train was stopped because of lack of electricity on the line. I mean, we already are not plugging in all the things that we want to plug in, allegedly.
Yeah.
And we are short now. What the heck are we going to do? And no one's addressing it. No one's talking about it. There are some people out there talking about it, but there's not a commitment to this.
Yeah.
There's buzzwords, but there's no commitment.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's one of those things like, you know, in the construction industry, different people talk about different things. I have nothing against electric cars. I love them, actually. But as an electrician and someone who's been involved in design projects, and I relate with utilities, and I love how no one talks about this, but their grid isn't able to handle what they're being asked to do.
Correct.
Like our sister company that does electric work is installing car chargers all over the place. And townships are saying, you can't turn them on.
Right.
And the utility is saying, yeah, you can't use those.
I think, and I will tell you.
Well, I didn't know we were getting into this stuff.
Oh, this is huge. This is more important than people realize. I think one of the only thing I admire, I'll put it that way, about a Chinese communist system is their ability to industrially plan 20 years in advance. If you actually read their industrial plan, I think it was from 2005, absolutely amazing. They went out, they procured all the natural resources all around the world.
Where can you find that to read it if people are listening?
I think actually Marco Rubio wrote a commentary on it.
Beautiful.
And we'll link to that.
Okay.
I'll give you the commentary.
That's awesome.
Their industrial plan, and he had an answer to it, which I think is amazing. Our focus is so short. Our attention span is so short. It's what's killing us in the Middle East. It's what's killing us in the battle for resources. Our attention span, our focus, and our planning are not there.
Yeah.
We can't, because of our democratic system, which is amazing and the best country in the world.
Agreed.
We can't. The downside is we cannot build a 20-year plan to get where we want to go.
Yeah.
And there's less likelihood of that happening than almost any of the other things we want to happen.
Wow.
And bringing it back, because I know that sounds ridiculously big picture, but bringing it back to what we're talking about, sustainability can't happen without the recycled materials industry. You have to have everything above the ground be reused.
Yeah.
Going into the ground is a little dirtier.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have to be dirty, though.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge it's dirty.
Yeah, 100%.
And we have to understand the cost of that dirtiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just have to be fair about it. The evaluations of fossil fuels versus the new technologies, we just need fairness in the evaluation.
Yeah.
And if we can all come without an agenda and be fair, we have a chance. But if we have agendas, it won't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd like to take this opportunity to announce Dan's candidacy for mayor.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No one wants that.
No, well, I mean, you're talking about things that are real and that matter.
Well, and it matters because I think sometimes we get confused. I think the people on the ground see things much clearer than people in the sky.
Yeah.
30,000 feet views are wonderful, but a lot of times people on the ground, and it's our customers, it's who we work with, it's our team here. When you're on the ground, you really can see things sometimes much clearer.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say it that way, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but just having been moved to a role where I'm not on the ground anymore, the most important thing that I've learned in my new role is the importance of being connected with the people that are on the ground.
Absolutely.
And I think that we need each other. But if I'm going to be really honest, I need them a lot more than they need me.
Sure.
I mean, that's the truth of it. I mean, the guys and the girls that are on the ground that are making things happen. You know, we talk about this in our office. It's like our office staff supports the frontline workers. It supports them because the frontline workers are the ones that actually make money.
Right.
The office staff, while they're important and they're there to support the frontline workers so that they can do that.
They're on the expense line.
They're on the expense line.
That's the summary of that.
It is the truth.
Right?
It is the truth.
It's an
Absolutely.
expense line.
It is the truth. And that's an important thing for us to remember because we get away from what you call the dirt. We get away from that and we start to think like, well, you know,
Right.
I'm important. You know.
Well, I will say, since you did that, I'm just back from the beach. It's the only week of the year my hands get clean.
Well, look at that.
They dig in the sand all week. Now, and the problem is, the reason they're not as clean as they should be is Hurricane Debbie cut our week short.
Oh, man.
So I didn't get to grind in as much as usual, being Lebanese, of course.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Yeah,
I have a
but-
question for you.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. You're going to say something.
I do want to take something from what you just said.
Please do.
I think it's a false line that we create between, and I created between on the ground and in the air. I think
Yeah.
it's a false choice. Our training programs, we talk about college or trades.
Yeah.
We talk about education or doing manual labor. And I think the blurring of that is what will create the most successful people of the future in all these fields. Because if we want people like you who take a trade, build a business, and grow, they can't choose one or the other. They have to be educated and in the trades.
Yeah.
And the one thing I don't like about the argument of trades or college is there aren't enough people saying you need both.
Oh,
and
I love it.
if we could get people to, and it's a lot of times, you know what? It's why I wear this shirt a lot and I wear it out a lot to things
Yeah.
to surprise people, because I feel there is such a need to break down the blue collar, white collar thing, because I feel to be AI proof
Yeah.
as an industry and as a person, I think you need both skills.
Yeah.
I think that makes you AI proof
Yeah.
in the future.
I think what you're saying is what I say to my kids. It's like, listen, I want you to get an education. I'm going to be really honest here, and I'm just going to say this. I don't care if they have a degree, but I care that they have knowledge. And I think that knowledge is something that you must keep going after. Because it's like, listen, and that's the problem with a degree or a certificate or whatever.
It's not a finality.
Exactly. And it's like, listen, and you and I both know this. You're 53. You're almost
Yes.
dead.
Yes.
So
With
it's
a
like
pulse.
in your second half of life here, has learning stopped or has it
No.
increased?
It's commencement, right?
Yeah.
Does the word commencement mean end?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what people need to
Commencement.
remember and go after. And
Absolutely. And the learning is every day. The learning is
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. The learning is just awareness. The learning is networking and meeting new people. Those
and
are
it's-
all learning experiences.
100% agree. I learned so much more from doing this podcast and talking with like I get such an opportunity to talk with people that I would never get to talk with, and it's like a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, you're gaining more.
Oh.
And we'll talk about my young team, but that is, for me, them doing a podcast and hosting it.
Yeah.
Is really my part of my training program, along with Chamber of Commerce, High Center events, and participation in Manufacturing Association, ManTech events. All of that is packaged as our training program. And you are absolutely correct. You're gaining more out of this by asking the questions than I am by talking. I'm serious.
Yeah.
And it's the exchange. The person asking gains so much more.
Absolutely. So with that, this is the point where I want to just ask you a question and kind of break it up a little bit.
You're trying to bring structure to me.
Well, you know,
God bless you.
I can't imagine if you had caffeine. It would be insane.
Ask my family.
So what is a piece of gear or a tool that Dan can't live without, that you have to have?
Honestly, it sounds like such a trite answer, but I want to give this context.
Do you guys hear that he used the word trite? You can go to Google and look that up and go ahead.
Wait, a thesaurus or a dictionary, Webster's. You don't even know what Webster's is.
I do too.
Okay.
During 2020,
too.
I bought a 100-year-old dictionary because I wanted to know what the definition of words were before they were changed on the internet.
Your COVID was a lot more boring than mine. You really dove through that?
Wow. The meaning of words kept changing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's a peak too far for me, Josh. So
Trite. We were at Trite.
Yes, we were at Trite. Bring me back. I couldn't do what I do, and I couldn't lead how I lead without this. My dad led the second generation of this business, and he was stuck to his desk with a phone cord.
Wow.
If we so underestimate the
yeah.
power of this, I think we talk about it a lot, but I think we truly underestimate the power of this. For someone who wants to be a servant leader, this allows the nimbleness to be in everything. So I can be above and on the ground at the same time and connected.
Yeah.
I couldn't do my job without this.
Yeah.
Buying, selling, trading, looking up the COMEX numbers by the minute, and being able to communicate with my customers, it's a necessity.
You know, I do think that's an important thing that we forget is technology and how it advances. Like, I couldn't do my job without. I couldn't be operating the companies that I'm operating now without the technology that exists now. Like when I started.
Right.
When I started in the trade, they still had two-way radios in the trucks and a bass option that could blow the horn in the van. You know,
oh
it was
my!
Like, I started like when I was 2.
Right.
But all of that to say, you know, technology and advancing, and some of us get, and I am one of these people, but we get intimidated by it or we don't like it because we don't like change.
Right.
We get comfortable, and listen, comfort is a slow death.
Comfort.
That is, and in business, I heard this recently. In business, it is not a slow death; it is a fast death.
Of course, it is.
But technology, the wheel was technology. The hammer was technology. Imagine, you know, being a tradesperson a couple thousand years ago and be like, "I'm not using a hammer. That's gonna take my job."
Right.
You know. Anyway.
No, it's so true. I mean, what would your tool be?
Wow, look at you. You're like turning the podcast on me. What would my tool be? Honestly, the thing that I can't live without is probably my watch.
Okay. I was actually looking at your watch, wondering why the functionality.
Well, one, watches for me carry a story, and story is really important.
Okay.
Like I'm wearing a Hamilton watch, and Hamilton is here from Lancaster.
My Uncle Frank worked there for a long time.
Really? Well, you know, and
there.
they were a huge part of our history, but a watch is important to me because I believe that being punctual and professional is the start of everything. I believe that if I tell you I'm going to be on a job at 7, I better be here 10 minutes early, which I was.
You were.
And the reason for that is your time is valuable. And time is the one thing that I cannot buy. So I want to know where it's at.
Wow.
So, and I like this because it doesn't need a battery. It's the same design that they made 50, 60 years ago or more, and it works. And I love the throwback to times past. I love history. I love all that. So for me, it would be a watch.
And plus, like you, it's right 2 times a day.
Actually, it's right more often than I am. That's for sure. So we've talked about a few different things here, and talking about the industry that you're in and all this. But I kind of got into this with you when we started, and the best podcasts are always the ones that are before we're recording. Just always.
Always.
But all of that to say, you've been like you're really popular here in the Susquehanna Valley, Central Pennsylvania. Like,
how do you rate
oh
that?
my goodness!
I have a research background in TV, so I'll need
Yeah.
to know how you're rating that. It's not Nielsen.
Well, we're not doing the,
No.
you know, that podcast that you did, Some BS with Brandon
Yes,
of
my
SWF.
boy.
That was very educational for me in the rating system. Like, oh my goodness,
It's
how did you
scary.
ever know if we liked anything? Like,
didn't. You wouldn't believe. So part of my career working, I was at Gannett, Tribune,
everybody can tell that he was in TV.
Comcast,
Look at his face; he has a face for TV.
for radio. I was very behind the scenes, but we would have a room of 12 people, and we'd be asking them questions. What do you like about us? What do you think? And it was, I don't like her hair. I don't like her lipstick. It's insane.
Wow.
The superficiality.
Wow.
And how that drives that industry. Wow. It's insane.
That is crazy.
It is. It is. So I'm not gonna take your popularity numbers at without more research.
Well, it's a little different now because you're everywhere, and I mean, Sahd is. You guys are doing a lot of different things, and
I hope to.
the thing that I wanted to talk about with you is that, you know, we're both at different places in our business where it's like, okay, how am I, you know, the Olympics just happened. How am I passing on the torch?
Mm-hmm.
How am I, you know, running the relay race? Because, man, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is a race where we're handing the baton to someone else, and I don't want to fumble it.
Mm-hmm.
I have fumbled it, but I don't want to drop it.
Correct.
And so I guess that was a football term for relay races. I don't know if that's really a thing or not, if they fumble it, but I just embarrassed my boys right now. They're like, Dad, don't talk about football. You don't know anything about it. So all that to say, you're in that stage right now with your team, and you have an interesting mix here of old and young. And let me rephrase that if your team is listening. Mature and wise and young and full of vigor. All of that being said, what is it that I read this morning that, you know, we all have a seed within us, and if we can pass that on, that is the fruit that we give to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about, you know, I think I said this in the beginning, but, you know, like when you are training a child, you take them by the hand and you lead them. When you're training a youth, you talk with them and teach them how to make decisions without you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I have some youth in my family. I have some youth in my company. And it's like, so how does Dan and his team do that?
It's to take your analogy one step further. I love how you presented that. And one of my favorite quotes is to plant the seed of the tree for the shade the next generation will enjoy.
Oh, come on.
That was butchered.
Come on.
But that's it. And that might have been in your 100-year book that you read during COVID. Like another old thing. But that's really a passion here. It's a passion that my grandmother really kind of embodied. And I think that's just a strain that comes through. It's nothing I created. It's something, I mean, I have 3 brothers who are priests. They're Catholic priests. They're mentors. This is something just inherent in me that I was given.
Yeah.
And it's something, it's nothing I tried.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, for us here, I see the value on both ends of the spectrum. The joy that I get most, you set it up, the young guys and the old guys. The joy I get the most is when I see mentoring both ways.
Ooh.
Two-way mentoring is
Come
how
on.
I like to call it. A lot of people think mentoring is old people teaching young people. And it's one of the most backwards definitions of mentoring I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I've learned more from the young than I can impart on them, in a sense. Because what you learn is you learn a new market.
Yeah.
You learn how your customers are thinking by listening, by just learning from the young. But the two-way mentoring, I love seeing that happen without me doing it. I like setting the stage for it and showing the value of it and just watching it happen here. When I see a young person teach an older person a little bit of technology and how to do a maintenance report on their phone. When I see an older person teaching a younger person how to sort a load of metal.
Yeah.
Those are things that make me happy.
Come on.
And I know it's going to grow our business. And and if I'm not at the center of it, all the better.
So how do you as being a leader of an organization, Dan, how do you lead that to happen? Because it doesn't happen if it's not fostered and facilitated.
You know, servant leadership to me is the base of it. You have to model it. People watch what you do more than listen to what you say.
Yeah.
And you have more of a chance of instilling it if they're watching what you do and you're doing the things that you want to show. But a lot of times you have to go a couple levels beyond that. And sometimes it's not a straight line. And sometimes success often is not a straight line. It's a zigzag.
Yeah.
Some of the things we do and some of the things we commit to, taking our guys from production and sending them out to a chamber networking event during the day. The first few times of that, my dad was absolutely horrified. He's come a long way, and he understands the value of what we're doing. But actions like that and understanding that is just as productive as what someone is processing speaks outwardly to the core values of the company and what we value, but it also gives the employee the sense of their value. And we're not paying you just to produce. We're paying you to develop you.
Yeah.
And whether that development happens here through a growth path that we want to show you, or whether we develop you and you go somewhere else, or you start a business with us in another way. Any of those are acceptable.
Yeah.
Because it's never a waste of investment. Having a mediocre person you don't train is more costly than training someone and having them leave.
Yeah.
Always, always, always.
So what would you say to the businesses? So I think fear is dangerous because people do stupid things when they're afraid, me included. And businesses are very afraid. I've heard this a lot. Well, I invest in people and then they leave. And it's like, and I pour it into them and I invested in them. And this is really interesting to me because I know that you have personal experience because I was actually at a networking event at this recycling facility. I feel like I have to say it that way.
Yeah,
when I
you
say
did.
It.
You did a good
Yeah,
job.
Thanks. I was at a networking event here for the Manufacturers Association. And there was a prior employee here of yours here.
Oh.
And this is what I noticed. It didn't feel weird to anybody else that was here, and it didn't feel weird to him, and it looked like it didn't feel weird to you.
I got him his next job.
Well, and so my question is to you in that regard, for those who are running companies who are like, well, yeah, but I don't want to invest like that because I'll lose them, and then I lose that. Tell us why we shouldn't be afraid of that.
Because you have to play what Simon Sinek calls the infinite game. You don't.
I love that.
Because I look long term. That investment I made in that kid who's a wonderful person who's going to succeed at every level will pay off to me more times over than anything I could get by keeping him here. Yeah. And it's valuing the network you're creating. We don't value the network we create. We don't need to control things to still have the gifts that come from them. And I just, by playing... Wait.
You got to say that again.
Yeah.
Say that again. We don't need to control things
to still get the gifts and benefit from them.
Come on.
We are going to get benefit from Carrie, who left and went over to Bravanda, which is another amazing company, and he's doing wonderfully there. He had a passion for a job I didn't quite have in place yet.
Wow.
And I helped him. He went back to school. I saw his gift, and I just helped him find another place of employment. And I'm not possessive of that. I know more is going to come. I guess it's an eternal optimism and understanding the long game that allows me to do that. And I just feel we're going to attract more because others are going to see that, like you observed it. I didn't try to show it.
No, you didn't.
Came.
But you can't hide it.
No.
You can't.
Because it's authentic.
Well, and I think you touched on something that as we grow in leadership and organizations, that we must continue to hold like this, with an open hand. when we grow in an organization, we feel like we've come to a point where we have to control things sometimes.
Yes.
And I don't want to get away from like responsibility. Like you have a responsibility as a leader, yes, but control is actually a limiting factor. Yeah. And what you're talking about with these different people and building a network, it's like you have to allow control. You have to let that go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you truly are about personal development,
yeah,
you can't care where that development happens, because in doing that, you're modeling how you are, and that's only going to attract more good.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And it's pretty obvious. Like, that's what I mean when I talk about you're everywhere and you want to talk about the ratings. It's the network that you're creating, because the network that you're creating is a growth mindset. I heard a guy say that we can learn and grow. There's two camps. You can learn and grow, or you can protect and defend.
Right, absolutely.
And protect and defend, if you don't know this is a nugget for you if you're listening. Protect and defend is a guaranteed shrinking mentality, because when you go into the protect and defend, you will miss the opportunities. You will miss, and the increasing of your network is where the opportunities come from.
Always.
And so I think that you're touching on something that is so important, especially in the trades. I don't know why. I say I don't know why, but yet I find myself having to re-deal with it all the time. I talk on a podcast and I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I have to deal with all of these things all the time.
Of course you do.
And it's like, but that fear when it comes in and we want to take control because we're afraid, we've got to push beyond that and let it go, or we will, like, it's the difference between you looking up and out and looking down and in.
Absolutely.
And really missing it.
Absolutely. And you touched on something about growth, I think. I think a lot of times that mindset of protect and defend comes from, sometimes it's inherent in a constant need to scale and a constant need to be bigger.
Yeah.
I don't see growth in that way. I see growth in being the best possible. One of my favorite books is Small Giants by Bo Burlington, and being a model for success and business in a community and taking that and everything that entails is what our main goal. That's how we see growth. Yeah. I see growth by having as many people here develop as fully to their potential as possible. That is growth for me.
Yeah.
And then taking that and inspiring others like you to do the same thing, and inspiring a community to believe in that, and creating that network. That, again, that's thinking of life in terms of abundance, and thinking of life in terms of an infinite game. You don't need to win right now, but you can win long term.
Yeah.
If we're the last small company that is just excellent, and we are a model for how we do things in an industry of consolidation, in a sense, we've won.
Yeah.
That's looking at things over the long run.
Come on, Dan.
We could sell anyone. This industry is just rife with consolidation, like yours.
Yeah.
The trade industries.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Finding a good local business is impossible these days.
Yeah.
And one thing when I'm out, what I see is my customers and our potential new customers, they want to know who they're working with. The easiest customer to get is one who doesn't know their current vendor in any way, or is nameless and faceless.
Wow.
If they can reach out to us directly for service, we've won.
Yeah.
And that's where sometimes getting too big does hurt a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about getting too big, and let's just be really clear. Sahd is not small.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking, you've built upon generations. Mm-hmm. You've built upon generations, and I think that you touch on something that, like, this is like business consulting with Dan Sahd 101. That's what this is right now. This is great.
The before picture, not the after picture.
Well,
no.
You talk about something, and I see it here in what's going on, and in what you guys are going after. And I think this is something that I want to kind of drill down on with you. And that is, I see the little guy bring bags of beverage cans in. And I actually
we've had strippers, we've had beverage cans, and we've had size. So I don't know where else you're going to go in this one. Lots of editing.
We don't edit anything. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that. We don't edit anything. So all of that to say, but then I also see you working with some of the biggest manufacturers and companies out there. And so I find this interesting, your approach, because some of us sometimes can be like, well, I want the big contracts.
Yeah.
But I see you going after both. And that's actually difficult. So can you talk about that? Because
your power of observation is pretty darn good. That is one of our daily struggles.
really,
It is. And opening to retail has a cost. We sell metal out of this yard to the public.
wow.
The time and effort and cost is all inherent in that. It kind of goes back to exactly what I said about community. We're not a business, we're a community.
Okay.
And a lot of times you can say it, but we actually mean it. And by treating the customer with 8 pounds of cans, as well as the person who has 200,000 pounds of copper a year, is how we build community. You don't treat them equally.
Right.
And our priority is to get more of those 200,000 pound accounts
Absolutely.
of copper. But the way you do it is, again, by thinking of abundance, building a network, building a community, because you never know where this person who brought the 8 pounds of cans in, that their uncle runs the fabrication shop that you want to work with.
Come on.
It's how we operate. And I got that from my dad. Honestly, my dad came into the business because he had to. He was a teacher, and his dad died of a heart attack.
Wow.
In 1972. And he was 23, I think, and just had to come into the business.
Wow.
And lead it at that level. Shell-shocked.
23.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
probably why he was 25 because he was born in 47. It's probably why this place was like punishment when we were kids.
Yeah.
I was 8-year-old.
Yeah.
You were 2 when you started. I was 8. And this was not where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Every day it was, what are your plans for today? And if I didn't have a list, this was on the plan.
Yeah.
And I couldn't come up with enough elaborate things to have enough things to do. So I think his way of discouraging or making sure I wanted this led to my career in TV for about 12 years.
Okay.
And to have me come back because he wanted to make sure I wanted it because it's something he had to do. Now, he grew to love this, and he's still here driving trucks. My dad's
Really?
77, and he's driving roll-off trucks.
Wow.
He's amazing. He's
That's
amazing.
awesome.
It is. And the work ethic,
Yeah.
again, not by what he said, but what he shows.
Yeah.
The work ethic of that, it's what he enjoys.
Would you say I'm getting a little off track here, but you touched
I know.
on something?
Well, I've led you off.
There is
track.
no track.
There's no track today.
there
The
is-
train is going to be so late.
But you talk about that. I've recently been reading a book, and they talk about happiness in life. And one of the leading things for happiness in life and for longevity of life, and there's science behind this. It's really
Is this Arthur
fascinating.
Brooks?
Strength to Strength?
No, different
Okay.
one. Okay.
But there's science behind it, and you talk about a network. You talk about your dad, and what they say in the book is that relationships are where it's at.
Oh, absolutely.
And actually, they even say that men struggle with that more than women do, and the importance of those relationships. And so, would you say that your dad's network and his relationships are like? I mean, you say he grew to love this. What was it that he loved about it?
Oh, he loves the people. He's my dad's a model for a lot of things. He's having a class of 65 as his high school class. He's
Wow.
gathering them all out on his Susquehanna River little place tomorrow.
Wow.
I mean, community is all he's about.
Yeah.
Their church, Holy Trinity here, and just the community he's built,
Yeah.
that's what means everything to him. And I'm sure that's where I got that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's why I'm able to build that. You touch on something with men I think is very, very important. Going back to the Gen Z crowd.
Yeah.
These guys have so many challenges as a generation. Every generation has.
Yeah.
But I find them to be the most inspiring to me. I think I think Gen Z has the most promise of any of them. If you look at these kids, the class of 2020, which is what a lot of my crew came from, the year that was kind of ruined for them.
Yeah.
The resiliency that they got out of that
Yeah.
and what they are building is going to be amazing. But through it all, mental health in that demographic, males in that demographic, which is what we have here.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of the driving reasons behind all of this is we are building community. And you can see, if you look close enough, you can see the need for community is what will lead people to your workplace versus others. The community 100%. You have around you.
Yeah. I would call it culture, but community, it's the same thing. I mean,
it
well,
is. Culture is more of a buzzword than community to me.
It is. You're
because
right.
community sounds more real.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I like that because to articulate what I mean when I say culture, it's the way that the people in our organization relate with one another.
Right.
That's what it is. And what do you want? Do you want to be in a community or a culture that is inviting, encouraging, and uplifting?
Yep.
Or do you want to be in a community culture that is demeaning,
correct,
destroying,
command and control?
Yeah,
command
exactly.
and control, or this. And I think for a lot of people listening, the key to Gen Z and those employees is that community.
Yeah.
It's worth dollars to people.
Yeah.
It's worth dollars. So when you speak of men not being able to relate, work has replaced church. It's replaced all the institutions.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to build it at your workplace.
Yeah.
And I think we in the trades can learn that. We can lead in that.
Yeah. Well, not only can we, I think we have to lead in that because
absolutely
there is a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a crisis right now. We started with that with the electrical grid and things like that. Like, we don't talk about it, but if you're not worried about it, you should be.
Right.
And this crisis that we're in is we need men and women and people to be willing to get their hands dirty to do the things that need to be done for us to be able to live the lives that we've come so accustomed to.
Absolutely.
I mean, I heard someone say once that the thin line between chaos and order is electricity.
There you go.
and
it's true.
It really truly is. I mean,
that you take that away, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. And so I just think that, that's why what you're doing here is so important. And that's why it's so important. The vision of Blackline and the line is to lift the view of the skilled trades. And that's why we're having this conversation and we're doing this because what you're doing matters to a point so much so that other companies need to see it and they need to establish what are they going to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. And your mission and what you've created inspires me. Just the fact that you've invested so much in training and your training isn't going to be, I don't know a thing about your training, but what I do know from talking to you is your training is not just about two wires. Your training is about the whole body.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your training is going to have pieces of this in it. And can't, apprenticeship is not just about the technical stuff. It's about the stuff between the ears. And that's so important.
It is so important. I love the word apprenticeship because you can apprentice at anything. But a lot of people don't understand, I think, what that word means. An apprenticeship means to come alongside.
Correct.
You work alongside someone. In our industry, in the electrical industry, there's book learning, because there's theory and all of that stuff. But and I was an apprentice, so I can speak to this. The most valuable thing is not that. No. You can read about something, you can watch YouTube videos on it, but listen, if you're going to wire a medium voltage transformer, you sure as hell better have done it with a journeyman or a mechanic who knows how to do it, or you could be dead.
Absolutely.
And
I would even go a step further to say that two guys on a truck, which is the picture I have of what your apprenticeship may have looked like. The
that is what my
lessons
apprenticeship
you
looked like.
learned
Yeah.
wiring that are invaluable. But I think the lessons you learned from the conversations there,
100%.
as a young man, whether you took it as something you wanted to emulate or you took it as something you didn't want to emulate, are just as valuable.
Yeah.
We think sometimes that the only role models are the ones, and no one's perfect. No one's a perfect picture. But the definition of seeing a role model is seeing the totality of that person and picking the pieces you want to emulate and the ones you don't.
Yeah.
And I think those are the lessons. I think about guys on jobs, especially traveling to job sites, and think, I think those conversations are so forming for a young man to say it, or a young lady. I would imagine that had just as much value as the, following the schematic of the wiring.
Absolutely. Well, and it's definitely more entertaining.
Yeah, sure. It is. It is.
Well, it's interesting that you say it that way, because I always say this on the podcast when I come to this question. And that is, mistakes are something that I've learned from. And I've shared this story before, but when I would drive in those vans to the job and from the job, and we would drive, in the industry, in the trades, you go where the work is. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't always mean that it's 5 minutes from your house. Actually, it usually means it's never 5 minutes from your house.
Course.
Yeah. And you go where the work is, so you have time with someone while you're driving. And guys would share things with me on those drives. Mm-hmm. And they'd share their mistakes with me. They'd share things with me that they had done, and they're like, hey, I did this, and it didn't go the way I wanted it to. And I'd be like, oh. And it was huge for me because it provided an opportunity for me to learn without the pain.
Right.
And the best ones were when they told me, and I'm like, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. And I went and learned with the pain anyway. But then there was an exclamation point of, oh, I was told this, but I was too young, dumb, and arrogant to listen. Like, I'm telling you, that has been one of the biggest things in my life, learning, is my pride and my arrogance being crushed and destroyed to the point that I'm becoming humble.
Yes.
Because humility and humbleness, man, your life, you will have way less gray hair than me. I mean, who knows what happened to you? You don't have any hair. So
it's fresh today, too. I did moisturize for you. I didn't do cocoa butter, though. I didn't want to get too much glare.
Wow. So it comes to the point where I want to ask you a question, because we're sitting in the van here.
Okay.
And there is an entire audience, of people that are listening that have an opportunity here to learn. Just like I'm learning from you, just like you've learned from your mentors.
And I've learned from you.
And what is a mistake that Dan has made in his life so far in these 53 years that you would be willing to share, that you've learned from, that you want other people to learn from so they don't have to repeat it?
It's like, which one to pick?
Yeah. You are not the first person to say that.
Which one to pick? First, being in a trade, I'm lucky that I don't have an easy one to point to, and I have a million near misses.
Yeah.
And
wow.
And not to take this to that level, but first, to answer it this way.
Yeah.
I've had, and I think anyone can, if they're very honest and do an examination of conscience, you could rattle off 10 or 15 times you could have died in your day.
Boy, that's true.
From something you've done. And the power of creating a culture where we all speak about them in our industries.
Oh, come on.
Is something more important than anything anyone else could take out of this podcast.
Yeah.
Is the power of admitting your near misses.
Agreed.
I've had a tub of wheels that I was dumping on a ramp over there, so stupid, over into a truck. And because I wasn't on a straight platform, when I went to dump them, the forklift started to roll. And I jammed I had the presence of mind to get the mast down and use the truck to rest on it and get out.
Wow.
But I think any of us
Yeah.
in fields like this, we could rattle off
Oh yeah.
10 or 15 of those kind of mistakes
Yeah.
that fortunately didn't result in worse.
Yeah.
But taking it on a personal level, man, that's so hard. And
Yeah.
there's so many I could tell you. But I'd say a general theme of mistake is not sharing my true thoughts earlier
Ooh.
of things I didn't know or things that bothered me that I thought other people would be offended by.
Wow.
I'm a people pleaser. I care
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
And being authentic earlier in a relationship and in a situation really allows you to divide out who's behind you and who isn't behind you. And not that you write off people, you put them in a category where you
Yeah.
honor them, respect them,
Yeah.
but you know they're not your go-tos.
Yeah.
And when crap hits,
And it will.
and it will, and you can be true and honest about what you exactly feel about it quicker,
Yeah.
you know who your go-tos are.
That's really good.
It is.
That is really good.
And it's a mistake that I've repeated throughout my life. It's not a one-time learn.
Yeah.
It's something I've repeated throughout my life, and I know every time it's going to be better quicker.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like making that decision to do it. Like I can see it in the way that you're talking. It's like you've had these realizations, but it's like you don't want to do it, but you know you need to do it.
Right.
You know it's going to be better, but maybe you're afraid of it. Maybe you're not. And being a people pleaser, which is something that I don't suffer from, but but being a people pleaser is a huge superpower in one sense because you're probably really high in empathy.
Exactly.
But it's also a huge negative in the same place if you can't learn that.
Correct.
If you can't learn that, because the deal is people pleasing is good. It's really good for people like me because I'm very reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can react to a situation and be like, all right, I'm done with that. When that's not fair because I think I have all the information.
Correct.
And the danger is I'm a great poker player. I can read the room. I don't play poker, but I mean like that that mentality. I can read the room and I'm right most of the time.
Correct.
But the problem is people get lost because I don't lean into that empathy side that you have where it's like, well, how much would I lose if I lost that person because I'm wrong about it and I don't realize, I don't give them the opportunity to actually show me who they are.
But the power of your humility is your self-awareness. What you just rattled off to me sounds like a Clifton Strengths test. I mean, you know it.
Yeah.
You can compensate because you know it. Those who don't know it and aren't aware
Yeah.
can't.
Well, I think
So
that's a huge
that's
danger.
That's powerful self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I bet that's part of your apprenticeship program. I can help you write your apprenticeship
Well,
program.
I'm all for that. I
But
100%
I know you
need
will.
help.
No.
Yeah.
I know you will. I because I can just hearing that from you, that humility to cite that is self-awareness, and that's the only way any of us can improve.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is something that's so underrated and never talked about.
You are absolutely right. Not only is it underrated and never talked about, it is the downfall of most great
Correct.
organizations.
Correct.
I mean, you can go through history, and it is amazing to me. And some of them aren't great organizations. They might have started that way, but a lack of self-awareness, especially in leadership,
Oh,
it's like we get a couple of wins, and we're like, well, I know what I'm doing. I got this figured out. And it's like, that is the beginning of the end, my friend.
absolutely.
I mean, yeah. Well, we are coming to a close here, but before we do, I just want to say a couple of things. You guys, you have your own podcast.
We do.
That you do. I've listened to a few of them, more than a few of them. And
It doesn't have the sound quality, and we've never used our grapple.
Yeah,
My
well,
dad would also be horrified that we're using a grapple to hold microphones. for a podcast.
Well, I don't
So
think our
please
microphones are
don't.
going to break it. So, but if we do, we did scratch it. So
Yes.
I realize if we get a bill, I understand. But so you guys are doing a podcast.
Yes.
I just want to just briefly here, if you can, tell us why.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've noticed and then I've become aware of what you guys do, you are like pouring out knowledge. Like pouring out knowledge, not just your podcast, but your posts. The other day, you guys had a post on LinkedIn
Okay.
where you were explaining, and I knew this because I was an electrician, but you were explaining the importance of stripping and cleaning your own copper.
Yes. Correct.
And it's like,
We're back to the strippers.
we're back to the strippers.
We
We
have
go
never
full
left.
circle here. But it's
With
like,
that in your dictionary, your 100-year
The stripper.
dictionary, stripper. I would be interested if Merriam and Webster, or either one.
you think Miriam was a stripper? You think that's how she did it? Okay.
That's how she met Webster.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Maybe we need to adjust that authentic, not edit anything thing for the podcast. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back to my thought.
No,
Oh, here's my thought.
That's my job.
We-
Distract you.
Oh, well, you do great. You guys are pouring out education on everyone. You're pouring out knowledge. And, like, you guys are really smart.
No.
Like, no, I mean,
we're
seriously.
aware.
Okay.
We're aware
You're
of
aware.
our environment.
But I mean, you're talking about things like the index. You're talking about copper. You're
Yes.
talking about, like, I feel like, who's the guy? One of the Wall Street shows that like is making all the noise and doing all this stuff. I can't remember his
Jim
name.
Cramer.
Jim Cramer. You're like the Jim Cramer
Oh,
show for the
God.
trades.
We're both bald, and I'm a little. Jim Cramer has caffeine.
Yeah.
He does not use decaf. We know
that is
this.
true. That is true.
But no, it is our job if we want to inspire
Yeah.
people to live sustainably. Buzzword.
Yeah.
We're going to show them practically why it matters and how they can do it. Practically, how you can strip your copper and make more money for yourself.
Yeah.
Why it matters, the U.S. produces 70% of our steel from recycled metal. China is at 12%.
Whoa.
We need to all know these things.
70% of our steel is recycled.
Yeah, is produced from recycled metal.
Hello.
And that's using electric arc furnace technology. Wow. Blast furnace technology, it's 13%. So it's like, it's night and day. They're digging in the ground for iron ore. We talk about mining. Mining is going to be needed. We
Yeah.
need mining. But God, we got to do it all right up top.
Absolutely.
Passion. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
we have passion for this. And
Dude,
that's
you
why.
should.
We do. And to answer your question on the podcast,
Yeah.
the inspiration behind that really, first of all, it's in a dumpster.
I
Our
love that.
service is dumpster. So I was like,
Yeah.
let's put it where it belongs, right in a dumpster. I started it interviewing people, and I realized the best way I can teach people is to let them host it. So
Yeah.
I turned it over to Todd and Alex. They've done a great job.
They really, truly have.
And you know, it's their little laboratory.
Yeah.
They are learning leadership from the people they interview. And we're
Yeah.
definitely going to get you on if you're available.
Oh, absolutely. I
It's
love it. I
won't be
don't
as
have to fly to
nice
get on your
as
podcast.
this. We don't have a drone flying over it. Does the drone see my bald head?
Actually, they put a shield on it to cut down on the glare. So,
Thank you. This
well-
has been amazing.
well, and I so appreciate, like I said in the beginning when we were talking, time is money. It's the one thing that you and I cannot buy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have sacrificed your time here today, as you do so much. That's clearly part of your leadership style. And you clearly are a servant leader. You're one of the first people that I saw here when I got here this morning, and you were already working.
Yeah.
And so I think that says a lot to your team. It says a lot to those around you. It says a lot to the community. Don't know how you live and how you have so much energy.
Without
because
caffeine.
I don't know how you do it. You know,
gift.
you've been blessed by the Almighty with something that's insane, like that I do not have. But all of that to say, I love what you guys are doing here. I love how you are investing not only in the next generation, but the generation that is here. And you're taking that mentorship. Like, you've said some really good things here today. Like, mentorship isn't just the old to the young. It is both. They come together, and that's when they both learn. And, you know, if you're no longer willing to learn, then you should get out of whatever you're in.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just the reality. What is one thing that you want to send us off with to encourage people in that might be listening to hear you talk today?
God, just gratitude for this, gratitude in general for everything I've been given,
Yeah.
and the humility to know there's so much I don't know. And I just want to thank you for pushing the trades. I'd encourage everyone in the trades to understand it's not just about the trade. It's about what's between the ears. It's about mental health. It's about leadership. It's about business. You have to know all of it. Make yourself AI proof.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of silly, but middle management is going to disappear because of AI.
Yeah.
Make yourself AI proof. Be able to do something and run the business side of it. You got to do it all.
Absolutely.
So I think that well-rounded Renaissance person is going to be the key to the future.
Yeah.
So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for coming to our yard today. You're always welcome back.
Well, Dan, thank you for stepping up to the line. So guys, get out there. Make sure that you have what's in between here.
That's right.
What's in between the ears, that's what matters.
That's
so,
right.
Have a great one.
Thank
Thanks. All right. That's it.
Pleasure, my man. That was wonderful. Oh, you do such a good job.
Thank you so much.
You do such a good job. And you guys do an amazing job. I wish Todd was here. He's away. He could learn a million things from you. I actually want to just